And hello, welcome back to another Our Toronto live stream. And today we're going to get started with a video that I made, I think, a couple weeks ago. That is titled Bike Lane Removals and the Latest on This Controversy. And we're going to get into it and discuss the comments that you had about this video. Let me just go ahead and loop the video there, and we'll just kind of watch it there as I go through this. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started with the first comment that was made by JWB19. So I'm not even a cyclist advocate, and even I'm saying to myself that removing bicycle lanes is a waste of time and money. Leave them as they are until more transit is built and see where things go. So yeah, I think that that's what the problem here is. I think that I completely agree with this statement. I think that that's what the core issue is. The bike lanes were there, right? And there was no issue. I mean, I don't want to say there was no problem with them. I mean, there were people that agreed with it and didn't agree with it, but it didn't become such a big issue until Doug Ford made it a big issue by removing the lanes, and they kind of stirred everything up with it, didn't he? Right? And that's where I'm kind of coming from at it. And I think that a lot of people are coming at it from that point of view, that this is just a waste of money. We put the money, we spend the money, the City of Toronto spends the money on putting in the bike lanes. And now the province is now spending the money from essentially the same taxpayer base to now have the bike lanes removed. And I think that that's what's got people all up in arms. Okay, so next we have from Canadian Investing here. So I live in the Netherlands currently. The biking infrastructure here is beyond what I could have ever considered. Yeah, well, we've seen videos of the Netherlands, and they have a pretty good biking infrastructure. Nobody can't argue against that. So roundabouts with bike priority, designated bike lanes, designated lanes for bikes, etc. Underground parking exclusively for bikes. It's incredible how many people here either don't have a car because of access to public transit or the effective biking system, or may have one, but primarily bikes. Removing the bike lanes isn't going to help. Quite simply, you can't fit that many cars in the same space, and you can't fit bikes into. The removal is a waste of money and resources. So yes, that's exactly the thing. It's really, that's the main issue here, is that it's a waste of money and resources, and either money was wasted on putting them in, or money is being wasted on removing them, and that is exactly what the issue is here. Now, in terms of the actual issue of whether it's better to have bike lanes or cars, well, I mean, North America is very car-centric, right? Unlike Europe, but I don't think that. I don't think that anybody's arguing that you can't fit more bikes into where cars will go. The issue is whether people will use bikes here. I think that's where the argument around it circles around. So Wizgifred says, I can't see a single benefit in removing them. Traffic will get worse because people will have to drive instead of bike. It's a waste of money to remove them. So I can't see a single benefit of removing them. Well, there are people that think that if you remove the bike lane, put in a car lane, that cars will be able to move faster. I guess if everybody wants to drive and clog up the roads and have a whole bunch of traffic downtown with cars just congesting the lanes, then I guess they're right. What can you say? Alex NR6 writes, I might have missed it, but did you address how Ford's election call will affect it? Can he be voted out of office and have 212 canceled? So Bill 212 canceled. So here's the thing. Yes. If he is voted out of office, if Doug Ford will be voted out of office, then Bill 212 gets canceled automatically. Any bills that are on the table are automatically canceled if an election is called and then that government is no longer voted in. But now, getting back to the first part of what you said, well, how will this affect Ford's? Or let me read that again. So, did you address how Ford's election call will affect it? Well, so here's the thing. Ford is calling this election because he thinks/knows that he will be reelected. Otherwise, he won't be calling the election. He knows that this is the right time to do this. Otherwise, he wouldn't be calling the election. So while in theory, yes, if he's voted out, then Bill 212 for the removal of the bike lanes would be canceled. However, he's doing this, he's specifically calling the election because he knows that he's going to get reelected, and he knows that then he could push through every agenda that he has. So, moving on. Real Chris Lozinski writes, they just want cyclists dead. If you take up a lane of car traffic as a cyclist, since you're a motor vehicle, they'll honk at you, swear at you, and sometimes even hit you. If you bike on the sidewalk, you'll be ticketed and yelled at by locals. So their solution is just don't use a bike, which coming from Doug Ford makes a lot of sense. Well, that's just exactly it. It's the whole ideology debate between bikes versus cars, right? And apparently we can't get along in a way where we have one lane for bikes and one lane for cars. I mean, that just doesn't work for everybody for some reason. So Carrie Dareth writes, the bike lane removal is just one more example of Doug Ford's petty grudge against Toronto. Yeah, well, you know what? Sometimes it's perception that's reality. And in this case, that perception is the reality that people are seeing. And you can't blame them. I personally view it the same way. I mean, I think that, I mean, for those that may not know this, Doug Ford ran for office in Toronto to be the mayor of Toronto and lost to John Tory. I don't remember which year it was, maybe 2016, 2017, somebody let me know. But anyways, he lost the election, and I think that he's still pretty upset about that. I think he's holding a grudge because of that. And the reality is that that's the way it's seen, right? Now, how many people, do the majority of people actually want the bike lanes removed? I don't know. Maybe we should just have a bike lane election. Because a lot of people in Toronto are advocates for the bike lanes, do want them there. And then you have your people that are outside the riding of Toronto, outside of Toronto, who drive into Toronto, who don't want the bike lanes there. And that's where this gets kind of messy, because you see, in provincial politics, it's not just Toronto that matters, right? But he's targeting Toronto specifically here. And the issue is that the voters outside of Toronto who will be re-electing Doug Ford and who do elect the premier of the province do not want the bike lanes there, because they want to be able to drive into the city. And especially outside of Toronto, people are very car-centric. So the people that own cars do want to be able to drive into the city, and they would like to see those bike lanes gone. They don't care about the people in the city, right? And the people that are in the city who originally paid for them are the ones that are upset about this. Now, Doug Ford doesn't care about the people in Toronto. And just to kind of explain the politics of it. So the people, because of the fact that it's the people that will be voting in Toronto against Doug Ford that are against the bike lanes, he doesn't care about them, because people in Toronto are not voting Conservative for Doug Ford anyways, and he knows that. So that's why he doesn't care about it. And that's where this is messy, and that's why people are peeved in the city. Because the way that this works politically is that in Toronto, people tend to vote Liberal. And Doug Ford knows that. So essentially, by screwing over Toronto this way, he's not losing votes. He's basically gaining votes by doing this. Because outside of Toronto, he will get those voters, because those people outside of Toronto, which is a big vote, by the way, he will be able to get that vote because those people don't want to have the bike lanes there so that they could drive. And so that's what the issue is about. So this is really about politics. And unless Doug Ford is a moron, he knows that, right? I mean, he knows. Doug Ford is a retail politician. He knows exactly what buttons to push to get elected. He knows where the vote is. And he will not think twice about screwing over Toronto, because he knows that his voter base outside of Toronto, which is, like I said, a huge vote, wants the bike lanes removed so that they could drive in. And that's what this is about. This is politics. This is not about what's best for the city. I mean, give me a break. Moving on. David Reichert, 9392 writes, removing bike lanes will not do anything to improve traffic congestion. Even with the bike lanes removed, an additional lane will not be gained. Again, we kind of get into the topic of induced demand, right? Build it, they'll come kind of thing, right? On-street parking will still be blocking the right lane. I don't think that, true, but nobody has yet said that they're putting in parking there though yet, right? They're talking about opening the lane up, right? I haven't heard anybody say that they want to actually put in parking there. That hasn't actually been said. At least I haven't heard of it. So instead now you will have increased congestion with bikes competing with cars for space rather than each having their own space. Well, yeah. And again, it's just kind of math, but it does kind of work that way, doesn't it? So next we have Transit Town. Actually, you know what? Before I move to that, let's continue here. We have a lot of replies here. I want to see what's written here. So that's my reply. I agree, of course. So then we have Ping Winger 1966 that says, if it allows even one more car to drive, park, or pull over, it's worth doing regardless of the cost. Interesting take. Interesting take. David Reichert 9392 replies, well then it's not worth it because it won't. I'm laughing because I'm not sure whether Pete Wingard is trolling us. Anyway, so unless you can explain how to turn a 2-meter wide bike lane into a 4-meter car lane, yeah, that's the thing about it. Then David Reichert 9392 also says the grassroots group of people behind this are a bunch of rich Etobicoke businessmen with close personal ties to Ford. Well, you know what I say to that? This is what I say to that. Maybe, maybe not. But why is it that when Doug Ford is accused of corruption or is accused of doing things for his friends, and that such an accusation is leveled at Doug Ford that it is so easy to believe? Why is that? Anyways, moving on. W. Terrace writes, I live in downtown and the bike lanes are a hazard. Interesting. So we have somebody claims to be living in downtown Toronto that says that the bike lanes are a hazard. I don't understand why. I mean, I don't know. I personally, I don't travel downtown. I live up in the outskirts of Toronto in the northeast. So I don't know. I don't go to downtown very often. When I go downtown, very seldom I'll take a car. Like in the summertime, I'll drive down there. Maybe sometimes, not in rush hour. But generally speaking, 9 times out of 10, I'll take public transit. So I don't personally have experience driving downtown with the bike lanes every single day. So I wouldn't know. So I'd have to take people's words for what they say about it because they know better. And that's why this discussion is so interesting because perspectives are different depending on who you talk to. Hogtown Boy writes, this is false as to allow cars to move around left turning cars at intersections. Okay, and in total 3 meters of road with and car are only 2.7 meters wide. Yeah, okay, I think you kind of missed the point there. And David Rector replies, I also live in downtown and have never found the bike lanes to be a hazard. Please explain how they pose a hazard. I'd like that explained as well, I have to admit. I mean, I have driven downtown next to bike lanes. I didn't find it to be hazardous. I don't know where this is coming from. But then again, I mean, people who live downtown just have different experiences, right? Or points of view, for that matter. Turn lanes already exist on these streets, yeah. The bike lanes are not 3 meters wide, yeah, we know that. I've measured it myself. Transit Town 7891 writes, so the bike lane removals for adding new bus lanes. Whoa, hang on a second. So are the bike lane removals for adding new bus-only lanes? No, you weren't paying attention to the video. You were not paying attention. No, that's not what they're going to do. They don't need bus lanes there. We have a subway. We have a subway there. We don't need a bus. There are no buses there. We have a subway running underneath those streets there. Torboy 9 writes, Ford's overreach of power. Yeah, well, I would agree with that. I definitely think so. Certainly it looks that way. I think it's very difficult to understand how this is in the best interests of public policy. How about leaving cities to govern themselves? Yeah, I really think that. I really think. Look, I mean, my point of view is that I really think it's up to the city, and I really think that Doug Ford has really stepped in it with this. Unfortunately, and you know, the controversy aside between whether the bike lane should be there or not, my point is simply that I don't think that it's his decision. I don't think that he should be doing that. Now, does he have the power to? Well, apparently. I mean, he basically owns the city. He's, you know, as they say, the cities and municipalities are creatures of the province. But I mean, so then why are we having elections in Toronto if Doug Ford is simply going to just govern the city himself? I mean, just take it over and do it yourself. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's right. So how about leaving cities to go? Ford needs to go. Well, one day he will. Just a question of what he's going to do before that time comes. We have an opportunity on February 27th, 2025. Yeah, but yeah, I don't think that's the direction that the wind is blowing from, though. Increasing from 20 to, okay, I don't get that comment at all. WTS, I don't get that one either. Pim Winger, 1966, continues on to write, we need to stop catering to cyclists. If it's so dangerous, change the law so that they can only ride in parks and private property. Otherwise, let them ride with traffic so the law says they can do. Drivers should not encounter even 1 second of delay due to someone who cannot ride at traffic speed. So hang on. Right there. Let's just stop right there. So drivers should not stop for one moment because someone who cannot ride at traffic speed. Well, so that's not happening. That's not happening. See, this is just exactly it. Drivers are stopping anyways. And the reason drivers are stopping downtown, based on everything that I've observed, is because of other car traffic. I think that cars stop for bikes and yield to bikes as much as they do for pedestrians. Now, would you also argue that cars should not yield for pedestrians? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure that I agree with all of that. Then last we have Hogtown Boy. Hopefully the removal goes through. Well, I mean, it's quite a divisive conversation. A lot of people have a lot of thoughts about that. Okay, so enough about that. Let's go to the second video. Second video here is going to be about the latest on GO Trains and Ontario invests more into train upgrades for improved service in Toronto. So let's take a look at this. Let's go through this video and see what you have to say. Let me put it on loop, and then let me just go to that video here on this screen as well. That's the one, yeah. Okay, and who cares about the ad? Okay, let's go down to the comments, and we've got 51 comments here. So let's talk about this. Let's see what you had to say about this. This will also be interesting. Kulis writes, let me click on read more. Let's get the whole thing. I don't use GO Train for getting to work, but I use it to the next town over or to Toronto for shopping, visiting friends, going to events, markets, and enjoyment. So essentially for leisure travel is what you're saying. I would love to see the GO Train network recognize the people who use it as an affordable passenger train service and not just for commuting. Yes, absolutely. I absolutely agree. Couldn't agree more. We're definitely losing out on GO Transit service, and we're losing out on what the GO trains could really be offering us in terms of transit, because they don't offer they don't operate frequently enough, and they don't have enough two-way service. So moving on, Kitchener GO line already needs two-way all-day train service both on weekdays and weekends. I would argue they all do. I mean, why is one line more specifically important than the other? I would say that all 7 or 8 lines, however many they do have, I should know, shouldn't I? But all the lines, I would argue, should be two-way all-day service. I'm car-free and I see its value. I just want it to get better. Yeah, a lot of people do, and I think that a lot more people would travel on GO trains if the service was better. See, right now, the way that we have it, with the exception of really the Lakeshore West and East lines, where they do have all-day two-way service, basically, that's pretty frequent on those 2 lines. Everywhere else, it's pretty much a commuter train that's taking people into work and out of work. Now, this model is like 40 years old. Right? When GO Train was established in the 60s and 70s, it was Southern Ontario and the GTA. Like, it basically didn't even exist. It was just Toronto and the suburbs. And it was just a totally different time and place back 40 years ago. And so the GO Train took people in to downtown and then back out of downtown. And at that time it made sense because we didn't have the kind of density and the kind of development that we see on the outskirts of Toronto that we see today. Back then, the suburbs were really suburbs, right? So people lived in their houses, their apartments, they went to the GO Train to go downtown to work, and that's how it worked, right? You basically had everybody working downtown and living on the outskirts of the city, and that's what the model was built around back in the 60s and 70s when the GO Transit system and these GO Train rail lines were initially created, right? So a lot's changed since then, and we have not kept up with it at all. This should have been changed in the 90s. At the very latest, in the early 2000s, it should have been changed. Where the GO Transit system was turned into a regional network rather than this commuter network that it's used for. So it's kind of really out of date in that way. So David Cook 8065 writes, we need 90% of the streets. Did I finish this comment? Nice to get out. Hang on. Oh, no, I didn't finish this. Let me finish this one. Beyond that, I wish Waterloo Region, GRT, and Guelph Transit get on board with Presto. You mean, listen, I don't live there, so I don't know. I don't go there. I did not know that they didn't use Presto. I don't know why they wouldn't be using Presto. They should be, shouldn't they now? Nice to get off the train and have one card that does everything everywhere the train goes. Seamless. Thanks for the video. Love seeing and hearing about the upgrades. Yeah, appreciate it. So... I mean, I really think that Ontario should have a regional or a province-wide transit system that is integrated. We have way too many cooks in the kitchen, and especially when it comes to integration, especially when it comes to regional transit, it should be a seamless system where you can use your Presto card to get on and off anywhere and everywhere. I totally agree with that. So now let's go on to David Cook 8065 who writes, we need 90% of the seats facing forwards. Hardly anyone travels on GO in groups of 4, and all seats facing forwards eliminates feet on seats. Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's kind of a thing. But I'll tell you something. A lot of people do that because it gets very, you know, those seats are, listen, I've taken the GO train on a longer trip several times, especially to Niagara Falls. I'll tell you something. I mean, yeah, you can get up and walk around, but you know what? Like, it's too hard to sit there for really long. Like, I mean, you see that on longer trips of people putting their feet up on the seats. You don't see it on the short trips as much. Now, the whole thing about the four-seater, the seats facing each other, I don't know. I think that's kind of nice. I personally, that's really just a matter of personal preference and opinion. I kind of like that. It's one of the things I like about the GO train is the way that it's set up. I mean, you know, we're getting it closer to plane travel if we have all the seats facing in one direction. That's just a personal opinion, and that is just preference, I suppose. So, with the number of packed trains being forced to skip Danforth lately, I think the era of spacious and relaxed atmosphere is behind us. We could use more optimal use of space in these carriages. So, this is very interesting because the GO trains are designed for commuter travel, right? This is not Via Rail, right? And they're basically a step between luxury and just public transportation. They're commuter trains. And I really think that Go Train kind of is in a class of its own. I think that they do have the right setup for commuter travel and for commuter services. I don't think there's any issue for that. Now, I think that they are not great for a 2-hour travel. I think they're great for a half an hour, 45-minute trip. I think they do just fine. Anyways, that's all I have to say about that. So that would mean that 90% of seats will be facing backwards when the train is running in the opposite direction. Yeah, I guess that's another thing, right? You could choose which direction you want to face if the seats are positioned in both ways. So David Cook 8065 replies, there are several ways to have mostly rows of 2, all facing one direction or either side of the aisle facing the opposite direction, or splitting the direction after the odd 4-seat grouping. Let's just think about which way the seats are. I didn't realize it was such a big issue of which way the seats were facing on these trains. I didn't have any problem with it. I thought it was actually kind of nice because you sit down in like those seats, like there's like, the 4 seats with like kind of open space in the middle there. That a lot of these new trains that have been like retrofitted and what's it called? I forgot the name of it, but they've been upgraded, right? They took the old cars and they refurbished them. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. And so they have those outlets on the side. So they have like the AC unit. They have like they have the USB port. I think that's really cool. I think it's really nice. Anyway, so Hysterics 8011 replies, I can't remember where, but I've seen double seat. Oh, there we go. The double seat thing again. That could be rotated at the end of the line. Might have been a burner somewhere. Well, that's interesting. Nubel Lacoste writes, Sydney trains have reversible seats. Hang on, sorry. Sydney trains have reversible seats so that you can always sit facing forwards. Interesting. Would be interesting to have something similar in future stock, but probably a bit much to add during a refurb. Yeah, I think it would be. I think it would be too much to add, but I really do. Look, if GO trains are going to be used for longer distances, for example, like for Niagara, London, or let's say further even to the east, like, I don't know, Belleville, Kingston, that kind of area, I definitely think, which is a 2-hour trip, by the way, I really think that they need to use more comfortable carriages. Okay? No question about that. It's an old system. It was used in trams. It's a long way from usable in modern trains. Again, for longer trips, yes. For commuter, I think it's just fine. Julian Smith 4295 writes, trains that I've seen that have mostly forward-facing seats as opposed to inward-facing can be rotated. Yeah, okay, there we go. So another person that's seen those. So Vistar 26 writes, the new GO train cars are definitely not comfortable. Interesting take. I've heard that several times. The seat alignment to the back is not proportional, and the backrest, the headrest makes the neck hella sore. The older cars are better in terms of comfort. GO needs to redesign the seats. You know what? I think to some extent that's true. At first when you sit on the GO train, I remember the first time I went on one of these new refurbished cars, and I saw like the new seats. And I thought, oh, that's so modern. They're so cool. And I sat down in them, and I really liked it, But so it's one thing to take like a, 15, 20-minute trip on those, and to sit there for like 15, 20 minutes, it's really good. But if you sit on that thing, and again, I go back to my Niagara trips, which are 2.5 hours long in those seats. They're very uncomfortable. And I've heard people mention that the old trains had more comfortable seats. And I think that is a thing. I think they do need to make them more comfortable for the longer trips, without question. Transit Town 7891 writes, so you were quite right about how the older coaches still in the original GO Transit paint scheme have started showing their age and need modernization. Yeah, no question about that. I don't think anybody could argue that. Would this refurbishment project also include repainting? Yes, of course. I mean, if you look at the video here, you can see painted. So this is the new paint over here. And that's the old one, right? So this is a refurbished car. These are all refurbished cars with these new paints. These are the old cars that are not furbished. So there you go. David Reichert, 9392 writes, truthfully, there are so many different things to be done, it's hard to pick. Better rolling stock, electrification, improving and expanding existing infrastructure, expanding to new corridors, more stations and regional services are but just a few of the things that need to be done. Yeah, I'm a very big proponent of the expansion of Go, of improving the infrastructure. Listen, I lived in the city. This is the thing about Go Train, right? I lived in the city for over 40 years. And not for 40 years. Not 40 years. And I've only used Go Transit a few years ago. People in the city, in Toronto, don't use Go Trains. Typically. Some people do. But typically, people in Toronto do not use Go Trains as much. And so we have literally no idea. We don't even understand this concept of Go Train, right? Anyways, here's where I'm going with this. The first time I got on the Go Train was like 3 years ago. I just went out of my way to go on the Go Train. So I went to the X, and I went from Exhibition Station to Union Station. I'm like, this is awesome. And I was sold. I'm like, this is awesome. Why aren't we using this? I thought this is amazing. I loved it. And that's what kind of opened my eyes up to the whole thing about Go Trains and how we're underutilizing them. They're fantastic. They should be used more in Toronto. They should be used more to connecting us to the outskirts in Southern Ontario, nonstop. I think that the implications of this all around are enormous. For leisure travel, for business, it'll stimulate business development, job opportunities. Think about everything, leisure opportunities. Imagine if you can go to a Go Train station near you and decide one day to wake up in the morning on Saturday, I want to go to Barrie. Well, you can't. Because you would, let's say you live along Lakeshore somewhere, you could get to Union Station, but then you can't get out to Barrie because, well, the Barrie line only runs trains southbound during the mornings and then northbound in the evenings. So you couldn't make that trip possible. Now think if they had two-way all-day service, even on the weekends, especially on the weekends. You'd be able to make that trip. You'd just get up in the morning, say, I want to go to Barrie today, get on the Go Train, go transfer at Union, get up to Barrie. It'll take an hour and a half or whatever it takes, 2 hours. Spend a day there, spend half a day there, come back. I think that's amazing. But unfortunately, we can't do that. We're literally stuck in our cities because we don't have enough transit to get us around. Where do you go? Where do you go in Southern Ontario? Well, you go to Union Station. That's the only place you can go to. Wherever you live, that's where you go. Every road, every rail line leads to Union Station, right? It's a little ridiculous. Anyways, so moving along. Transit Town 7891 writes, this is a pretty good investment for more reliable and affordable electrified service for Go Transit rail network on all lines outside weekday peak hours by upgrading and refurbishing the older coaches, including new washrooms, doors, flooring, walls, lighting, and seating. I must say, the new coaches are literally spanking, yeah, they're pretty much spanking you. I mean, they look pretty new. They look really nice, and the washrooms are clean, the train's clean, and I think that goes a really long way. The seats, however, yeah, I think I will say that they should be improved. Scott 1416 writes, investment in Go is good because it's a great system. Thumbs up there, totally agree. 12 Evan 89 writes, look, I'm in favor of any transit investment and I only use the Lakeshore line, so I don't know if it's worst on others and by how much. Yeah, this is the thing. We only go where transit takes us. And if you live along Lakeshore, if you live along the Lakeshore line somewhere close to one of those stations and you use the Lakeshore line, you're in good shape. You could travel east to west pretty much all day long, anytime. And that's what you do. Right? And this is the thing, right? The reason that people don't travel out to other lines and go out to like Richmond Hill, Barrie, Stouffville, where else? Milton, Kitchener, is because the service isn't there. Right? And I think that it would be used if it was available. And the line that made that really obvious, and the station that made that obvious, the new service that they added recently, few years, they've been running it for a few years now, is the Niagara Falls service. that train exceeded the expectations of Go Transit to the point where they added additional trips on and they included weekends because they realized how much people actually wanted to use the service. I mean, like, it's time to wake up, right? Hawker 5796 writes, if Go's Richmond Hill line doesn't get two-way all-day service, the 61 bus should get the later at least. Yeah, but listen, I don't want to take the bus. If I want to take the... Look, Go Transit buses cost a little bit more than the TTC, but they are more comfortable. Now, there's two things here. Number one is it's kind of inconvenience, especially if you live in the city, to use the buses. Like, I'm talking about my situation. Like, I would not look for a Go bus in Toronto, okay? Like, nobody in Toronto goes around running around looking for a Go bus, okay? You must be talking about people living outside of the city. Yes. Maybe people outside of the city will find the 61 bus and take that down instead of getting on the Richmond Hill line. However, the train is still better. That's the other thing, right? I do go out of my way, though, to take the train, right? So, look, case in point for induced demand, right? Run the trains, people will come. Provable fact, practically. Next, let's move on. So, Jonathan Maniuk, I totally butchered that, writes the following. So while the investment is helpful, I can appreciate that these rail cars are being refurbished right here in Ontario. Yes. And I do find it frustrating that, hang on, let me just highlight the comment here. There we go. I do find it frustrating that we aren't with electrification of the network. Moving forwards, EMUs instead. They would allow for better acceleration of each train consist even over an electric locomotive, helping to shorten the ride for everyone. You know, this is something that's brought up here and there. I have to honestly say, like, unless this thing like goes from 0 to 100 kilometers in 2 seconds, like, I mean, look, I'm not trying to trivialize the argument. I mean, sure, it matters, but I don't think it's good. I don't think that a minute or two, like, even if I'm not sure if the this acceleration adds even a minute or two to a train trip, and I don't think that that's as big of a deal. I don't think anybody's going to care about a minute or two. Like, I don't think that acceleration is like such a huge issue that it's just turning people away from using the train, as they are right now even. I've never had any issues with accelerations on the trains. Let me continue with this one. So I would love to see the times increase, though, that we could cut down the express trains on Lake Shore, because the local trains are only adding extra 5-6 minutes because of how quickly they get up to speed. I'm not sure that it's because of how quickly they get up to speed. I don't know that that's why they do that. I think they're just trying to be efficient, and I think that they're trying to. I think that the reason they're running express trains is because of overcrowding issues, right? I don't think that they're doing it because the trains don't accelerate fast enough. I think I'd push back on that. I think that the reason, I'm pretty sure that the reason that they're doing express trains is so that the trains don't get overcrowded. Because remember, everybody's, again, either on the way into Toronto or on their way out of Toronto, right? Evidence of this can be seen with Caltrain in the Bay Area. Down in California, with the switch to EMUs, the trip times were drastically reduced for local trains. And even express trains added more stops, but still make the full trip in less than an hour. Okay, I'm not that familiar with Caltrains. I'm really not. I'm really not sure how much of a difference acceleration makes. I just don't have the facts to be able to comment on that intelligently enough. I really just don't know. Well, maybe something to look into. Here we go. We'll use the channel notes here. So look into train acceleration between diesel and electric to see, let me spell that, electric, to see how much of a difference these make? Okay, and let me put this into bullet point. There we go. That's something to look into. Insert, bullet points. How do I do? Format, bullet points, paragraphs, bullets, numbering. Yeah, numbered list, bullet list menu. Yeah, okay, there we go. And next, okay. Yeah, no, that's something to look into. That's something that I should look into, is how much of a difference it makes. I would be interested in knowing how true that is. Okay, so Code Warrior 1 writes, demand. Are we at pre-COVID ridership yet? Almost. They say 90%. They say 90%. I don't know how true that is or not, but they say 90%. I don't see why we wouldn't be. I mean, other than the fact that a lot of people have switched to the work at home model, and that's kind of like stuck with people. I know that that's stuck in a lot of cases. They are saying that a lot of places downtown Toronto are still vacant. So a lot of offices have left. A lot of places that used to be leased are now no longer leased anymore. They have switched. They've either gone out of business, or they've realized that they don't need the space because people can work at home. 20 years of almost 20 years of after having the internet, we've realized that people can live at home and work at home. And we don't need to spend all this time on office space. I mean, it just goes to show you how outdated in some ways this whole commuter model is for the GO trains. Where am I here? Okay. Let's click on read more. Okay, so Drew Patterson, 8261 writes, if you guys want EMUs, then the first thing we need to do is build the freight bypasses. Yes, I made a video about that. Covered that. Again, political / regulation issue. Not a GO Transit issue, but you are right. So long as GO has to share track with, here we go, with freight, then the best we can hope for is dual-powered locomotives hauling the refurbished coaches. Yeah, exactly. There's so much work that needs to be done before we can get to fully electric trains. Metrolinx is misleading the public by claiming it'll happen in a couple of years. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Metrolinx is the one misleading or if it's Doug Ford himself misleading. I think that, I'm not sure, I don't know if I'd say they're misleading. I think they're being maybe a little too optimistic. But look, I mean, Doug Ford and the province and Metrolinx have never stopped talking about the fact that they want to upgrade GO Transit service. And they've been pushing that, and they've been making advancements in that. Over the past, I'd say 5-6 years, they've made a lot of progress on that front. So, I mean, it might be optimistic to say it's in a couple of years, but we also have to consider that advancements are taking place. So next we have Diebold 6543 writing, spending $360 million to upgrade 16 cars means $3 million a car. That is a lot of money. It is. It is actually quite a bit of money. The older cars date from the late 1970s into the 2000s and will be 70 years old when the upgrade finishes. Hang on a second. Let's do the math here. 70s. We are in now the 20s. That's 50 years. That's, yeah, I think you're a little off there. It's more like 50 years, but that's still pretty old. Still pretty old. Point taken. Point taken. They should put more seating in pairs rather than quads. Again, the seating thing coming up again. Half the seats have to be facing backwards because trains reverse. Refurbished cars can still be used in EMU service, since with AC traction motors usually on one car in 3 or 4 is powered. The more efficient. This is more efficient than powering all cars and is consistent with modern usage. I completely agree. Adding Wi-Fi at the same time the TTC is getting rid of Wi-Fi from the subways. Yeah, that's silly, isn't it? Yeah, we can get Wi-Fi on GO trains, but it is a little bit different because that's a whole different discussion all within itself. But basically, I mean, GO Transit is just operating outside, right? I mean, it's very easy for them to get a signal from anywhere, right? You can get a signal if you have broadband, and et cetera, et cetera. The thing with the TTC is that, I mean, it's basically being kept hostage by, well, what else but the telecom companies, right? Or a telecom company now. I don't remember which telecom company it is that operates down there, but that is ridiculous. I don't know. Can't the TTC just pay a telecom company to, like, I don't know, have service down there? It is nonsensical. Anyway, so Right, moving on. So Amnesia Corner says, I hope they will keep the old paint scheme. Why? Why would you want to keep the old paint scheme? No. The old paint scheme looks like it's from the 70s, 80s. No, the new one looks amazing. Look at this. Look at that. Spanking new. What? This? You want to keep this? Oh, dear. I hate the old one. I love the new one. I mean, it looks old. Do you really want people coming to the city and seeing these trains? Or do you want people coming to the city and seeing these trains? Ooh, look at that. Shiny new coaches. I love the mismatch of old and new bi-level coaches too much. You love the mismatch. I don't know. I don't know. It does look kind of interesting, but I would rather see them all be new. I won't lie there. Okay, so the next we have 1417 Iron Man. None of this will matter if GO Train is still going to use the same tracks as the big freight trains. Yes, again, point raised already and very true. Before upgrading the cars, the signals, and whatever else needs to be done, they need to get off CP and the CN owned tracks. Okay, I hear what you're saying, but I disagree. So I still think, and I get the broader point of what you're trying to say here, and I disagree with it. I still think that GO Transit should be investing in the current infrastructure that they have. I think they need to be doing the best with what they have. I think that they are trying to do the best with what they have, and I think that the results are somewhat showing. And we can't just, we can't, one of these things really should have nothing to do with the other. I mean, we can't, I don't think that I would agree with the fact that we should be sitting around with old GO trains and old diesel engines just because CN won't let us use the rail tracks. I don't think that makes any sense. So moving on, Paul Devi 8628 writes, GO has around 1,000 bi-level cars, completely accurate. That is not much. Dollars divided by 1,000. What? Yeah, I don't think you understood. I don't remember how much it was. They're not, so, now I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but it's not 1,000 that are, not all 1,000 are bi-level cars are being refurbished right now. They're doing them in stages, and they're kind of doing them in blocks. So some have already been done, and then some are just not being done yet. But I think all of them will have to be done. Faster trains, please. Yes, faster trains. I think. Okay, so faster trains. I think faster trains would be appropriate on the longer distance routes. I think that the speed of these trains is not an issue, not for the distances that they're traveling, and not for the times between those distances, right? So, and for the utility that they're being used for, these short trips. Essentially, GO trains generally have stops every 15 to 30 minutes, let's say, something like that, usually, with a few rare exceptions, right? And for that kind of service, I think that. And that kind of utility, I think that the GO trains are, and their speed is fine. I don't think that there's a big problem with that. Obviously, we're not going to have high-speed train service between Toronto and Richmond Hill, or Toronto and Vaughan, and Toronto and Etobicoke, right? That would be a little ridiculous. But I do think that high-speed trains should come, and this is a different subject, but they should be used along more via rail corridors. That I think there's no question about. For example, service to London, Windsor and Sarnia, Ottawa, these kinds of places. And of course, that's a whole different topic all on its own. Okay, so we've been through all the comments here. Thank you very much for participating. Always appreciate your feedback, and for watching, as always. That'll conclude this live stream. Thank you very much once again, and I will see you next time.